Yo, welcome back to In the Arena, a podcast dedicated to past, present, and future educators. This is your host, Brentley Caballero. We're jumping right into episode 2. Today, I am excited to showcase our first teacher spotlight, then dive into why we need more bilingual educators, as well as the economic and societal benefits of becoming one. I'll also detail best practices for planning and facilitating lessons for bilingual learners. As always, I'll intertwine my personal and professional experience with today's topic. Our first teacher spotlight is Rodrigo Rodriguez-Tova. He is an Austin ISD teacher and the 2017 National Bilingual Educator of the Year. Mr. Rodriguez-Tova is a nationally board certified educator and a dual language instructional coach for the Austin Independent School District. He holds a master's degree in education with an emphasis in teaching and learning styles from Monterrey Institute of Technology and Higher Education. He is a facilitator at the district level and a big advocate for great public schools and dual language programming. He works at the National Education Association and English Language Learners Cadre in providing professional development workshops to educators across our nation. Mr. Rodriguez-Tova supports educators who are transitioning out of the classroom to become instructional coaches. He believes that coaching supports teachers to improve their capacity to reflect and apply their learning to their work with their students and also in their work with each other. I could not personally interview Mr. Rodriguez-Tova, unfortunately, but I found an interview with him that's not too dated on the Austin Independent School District's website. And it goes like this. Mr. Rodriguez-Tova was born in Mexico, but he found his calling in America. The 4th grade bilingual teacher at Cook Elementary has been named Teacher of the Year by the National Association for Bilingual Education. I started teaching because I want to help as many people as possible, Rodriguez-Tova said. The challenge is to continue to grow, and I'm thankful that Austin ISD gave me a place to do that. Rodriguez-Tova earned his master's degree in education and is a national board certified teacher. He said the recognition by NABE, along with a $500 scholarship and a 3-week trip to study in Spain, validates his passion for education. But he said he already has that validation of his goals from his students. The most important thing to me is my kids, Rodriguez-Tova said. When they face a challenge in learning, I try to find a way to teach from their culture. I want them to succeed academically, even if they are still learning the language. Rodriguez-Tova, whose students come from countries like Honduras, Cuba, El Salvador, and Mexico, knows the unique obstacles non-native speakers face in a new culture. After finishing his university studies in Mexico, he immigrated to the U.S. 15 years ago and recalled the first time he walked into Cook Elementary. I went to do the interview, and I just knew I was home. It turns out that I had a passion for teaching, and I want to learn as much as possible about my craft so I can help others. Mr. Rodriguez-Tova is a fantastic example of a high-level bilingual educator whose work transcends the walls of classroom. His work will impact generations of students. He is an inspiration to me for my postgraduate pursuits. I want to get my master's degree in education as well and pair that with the state teaching certification. I also want to become certified to teach EBs, emerging bilingual students, and ultimately become a nationally board certified teacher as well. I know the work will be expensive, but I believe the investment and the end result will more than justify the means considering Texas' growing bilingual population. It would be amazing also to one day teach other teachers how to enhance their lesson planning and facilitation for bilingual learners because, yes, I see that there is a great need for more educators in general, but specifically, we need educators who are able to teach bilingual students at a really high level. According to the Intercultural Research Development Association, over 1 million emergent bilingual students are currently enrolled in Texas public schools. And I'm not too sure if that incorporates public charter schools as well, because the number could be even higher. Texas educates the highest percentage of emergent bilinguals in the United States, and 28% of all Texas students between pre-K and 3rd grade are emergent bilingual students. Now, one might assume that bilingual education solely serves non-native Spanish speakers, but that is not the case. There are over 70 different languages spoken in Texas homes, and the number of emergent bilingual students has increased by almost 32% over the last decade. But the assumption that most bilingual education is oriented around Spanish speakers isn't completely erroneous. It's almost 90% of the students that need bilingual education. In my half a decade of experience in education, I was at a public charter school where the population was 92% Latino, Latinx, and most of them came from Spanish-speaking homes. Now, when I say I saw firsthand the need for growing our bilingual population for educators, I saw it. I felt it. And I was fortunate enough to be mentored and coached by seasoned and creative teachers. I was luckier still to get to substitute, get to coach, get to teach groups of the most amazing young people who frankly taught me a lot of Spanish, as well as other lessons. My experience at a public charter school taught me how important it is to be prepped for each class, to know how to engage with each student and meet their specific needs while building on previously acquired skills and knowledge. I learned that being a great teacher means anticipating misconceptions and planning clarifying reteaches. Of course, being great is also approaching each lesson with a sense of purpose and a sense of clarity in terms of an end goal in mind. My experience also taught me how little training most teachers have regarding bilingual education. I witnessed many enthusiastic educators, including myself, work diligently to prepare their lessons, but struggle to bridge the language gap for students who spoke little to no English in the moment of facilitation. I can still feel the disappointment of not being able to communicate to an attentive sixth grade scholar who clearly wanted to learn, who wanted to improve in mathematics, but he could not understand my instructions. And I did what I could, but I thank every scholar who could speak English and Spanish for taking it upon themselves, though they definitely did not have to and should not have to translate a piece of instruction or a question for him, and every other scholar who had not yet learned to communicate in English. I remember being part of a teacher-founded diversity, equity, and inclusion committee in 2020. And one of the ideas that I pitched was for Spanish lessons to be offered to teachers so we can improve our ability to communicate with students instead of waiting for the students to improve their English. Most teachers were receptive to the idea of taking Spanish classes, but it proved that a lot of teachers found themselves overwhelmed by the amount of work it took to learn Spanish, which I thought was revealing considering our kids that we taught were also going through a lot trying to learn a specific content while learning a specific language. So I thought it was a humbling moment and a moment that helped teachers have more patience and at the very least for our emerging bilingual students. But I truly can't tell you how many times I watched seasoned teachers intentionally not call on a kid who can only speak Spanish and think they're doing them some type of favor. I think it was done out of kindness, some attempt to spare the kid from embarrassment. But even if that were the case, what was also being silently and not subtly communicated is that the kids who can only speak Spanish cannot contribute to the classroom in the same way as the kids who can speak English or both. One of the sadder things I saw in my tenure was kids succumbing to the fatigue of trying to learn in a different language and giving up, and teachers succumbing to the fatigue of trying to teach kids who can't understand English and giving up. So what are some of the best practices for teaching emergent bilingual students? My wife, a multilingual education specialist, who I interviewed last episode. If you haven't seen it, go back and check it out. She not only tracked her 10-year career, but also offered so much insight into the field of education and specifically teaching bilingual educators. And this is just a deeper dive into the topic, but her firsthand experience is truly remarkable and worth going back and listening to. So if you haven't done it, go back and go and do that. So she provided me with an anchor chart that she made for her school, but it wound up being used for her whole district. Whoop, whoop. And so it says that it's a really solid piece of anchor chart. And I'm going to dive into each of these, or some of these, ones that I feel confident about. And so the 7 steps to a language-rich interactive classroom. Step 0, because the numbers cannot begin without 0, and a true facilitation of a lesson cannot happen without the proper planning of the content and creating language objectives. And so, as you can see in the example here, it says, I can determine the meaning of unfamiliar word and phrases in a text, content objective, and then the language objective. I can listen to and distinguish literal and non-literal language in a text read aloud. And so having these measurable and specific objectives will make it easier for yourself as the teacher to gauge success, as well as the students know when they are successful. So that just creates the outline. Without the blueprint, we cannot build. So there we are. Step 1, teach students what to say instead of I don't know. I was a student that said I don't know all the time. Like, I don't know, don't talk to me. I don't know because it's 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning and I don't want to know. Like, I could know, but I don't know right now because I'm tired. I don't know is one of those things that can be the bane of a teacher's existence, because it's not about not knowing. It's about how are you going to figure out, like, what do we do next after not knowing? And so instead of having them say, I don't know, you can have this anchor chart or create your own anchor chart with a list of things to say instead of I don't know, or a list of things to do instead of I don't know. So from this example, it says, may I please have more information? May I have some time to think, which is a really great one. They're probably going to ask one of their friends. Would you please repeat the question? Where could I find more information? I love that one because it's really putting the onus on them to go research. And may I ask a friend for help? And so instead of making the friend asking thing like some type of opt-out, it's doing what any adult would do, right? If you don't know something and you don't have your phone as a resource, you're probably going to ask a friend nearby. So why not make that something you can do in the classroom as well, and really help the students make the space their own. And so, yeah, getting them to say something besides I don't know is really, really powerful, and it lets them know that there's not going to be an opting out. We're not going to just stop because we don't know. We're actually going to keep going because we don't know. Step 2, have students speak in complete sentences. Because this, because that, because this, because that. We want to make sure that we're creating a strong academic environment by giving them examples of complete sentences. And so even if they have the correct answer, you want to ask them to clarify and specify why they know. Well, why is it this way? Can you explain to me how you got that answer? And if someone's responding to them or not responding to them, you're doing it in a way that's healthy. So I disagree with you because these are called sentence stems, for those who do not know, or for those who may have forgotten. And so sentence stems are a great way to create conversation and help students talk in complete sentences. Step 3, randomize and rotate when calling on students. As someone who has been observed by mentor teachers and principals, one of the first things that you are instructed to do is keep pace. What you don't want to do in a 45-minute classroom is spend 15 minutes on your intro or review from last class. Your do now, or your start first, or whatever you may call it at your school, should take anywhere between 5 to 7 minutes. Maybe 4 minutes of them actually working, right? The first minute, maybe you passing out work, or them opening their computers, wherever, accessing the content, in a 2-minute review. In that review process, it's really easy to call on the kids who got the right answer. And that may be a good strategy because it's a way to keep pace. At the same time, the pacing of a class can take precedent over making sure that everyone's voice is valued, everyone has an opportunity to speak, and everyone is pushed to contribute to the conversation in the classroom. And so randomizing and rotating when calling on students, having a literal randomizer, you can go to Google, type in randomizer, put a list of the kids who are in your classroom. You can have it preloaded so you're not doing it and wasting time. Or having, as this example here, sticks, or having numbers on the desk. All of these things, all these practices are ways of spreading out the workload and making sure that every student knows that they could be called on at any given time. That puts the onus on them to pay more attention and puts the onus on you, yes, to keep your pacing, but also not be so concerned about moving to the next part that you forget to call on a kid who hasn't spoken in 3 days. So I love that one. Step 4, consistently use total response signals. So one of the things that I was taught is like a fist to 5. Excuse the blister from my job. I'm a prep cook currently. Backtrack. So one of the things that we were taught is a fist to 5, right? 0 is I have no idea what's going on, and 5 is I have a really great grasp of what I'm learning right now. I could teach another person if I wanted to. And so a fist to 5 is a great way to calibrate how well a group of students is working, and a way for you to instantly receive data in the moment so you can respond. So that is one example. Thumbs up and thumbs down is another fantastic example, as well as having writing boards available, especially to the students who may not feel comfortable speaking up in public. As much as we want to contribute, everyone to contribute to the conversation of the classroom, we also want to meet everyone's needs and make sure that they can communicate how they feel safe. And so giving a student a whiteboard with an expo marker to write their question down can be a great way for them to contribute in a way that they feel comfortable doing. Step 5, use visuals and vocabulary strategies that support the objective. So again, anchor chart, having a large formatted piece of paper or poster board with instructions on how to incorporate vocabulary strategies that support whatever specific objective you're learning that day is a huge help. Students often forget, especially middle school students aren't the most organized. So things that we give them as guides often get lost. But what can't get lost is the things that teachers post in their classroom. And so giving students permission to look or walk over there is a great way to use visual and vocabulary strategies to help scholars accomplish the objective for that day. It also teaches them how to use their resources in the room, which is a very useful skill. Step 6, have students participate in structured conversations. I was taught that these are like turn-in talks. And so we're turning and talking about the specific theme in the poem that we read. And so you would provide students with a couple of sentence stems. I think the theme is this based off of this. And so having students share with each other before they share with the classroom, or just not sharing with the classroom and having that conversation with each other in a structured way, is a great way for them to build their communication and their communication skills, speaking and listening. And step 7 is very similar, except it is oriented around reading and writing activities. And so having scholars look for something very clear, something very specific, like the claim, having them look for evidence to support them claim, and then of course when they're writing, having them explain their reasoning. And so I think this, based off this, and this is why I have come to this conclusion. As someone who has spent years teaching ELA and as a co-teacher and months as a long-term substitute teacher, giving students the structured reading and writing time is one of the great ways you're going to help them improve their ability to process, synthesize information, as well as hone their ability to express their understanding. And so these 7-8 steps are critical and really a great way to just beef up your teacher's toolkit. But a true bilingual education training will teach you how to effectively use these tools and others. And so if those 7 to 8 steps were sound useful to you, imagine the utility of receiving training from highly effective bilingual educators. And so is it worth it? Is it worth it to become a bilingual certified teacher in your given subject? Well, let's just talk about the financial aspect. More than likely, you will receive some type of stipend depending on your district and your position. I know teachers who have received as much as $1,500 added to their annual salary, which, if reinvested just one time over a 2-decade career at a 10% compound interest rate, can generate just over $10,000, which is pretty amazing. Now, if one were to reinvest that $1,500 every year for 20 years at the same growth rate, the account would grow to almost $100,000. So including the financial aspect is meant to appeal to my and other people's desire for prosperity, of course, but I hope you can recognize that the true benefit of receiving bilingual education training is developing a strong foundation for providing high quality education to emergent bilinguals and bilingual students in general. If you want to teach in Texas and be as prepared as possible to meet the growing need for educating students across grade levels and subjects, then dedicating the time to become a certified bilingual educator will only help you help the students that you and I are lucky enough to teach. That is all for this week's episode. Thank you for joining in the arena. This is your host, Brentley Caballero. I'll see you next week for episode 3, where we'll have another teacher spotlight and explore why Texas has one of the largest lists of banned books in the country.